Welcome to season 14 of the Parenting Aces podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and this week I am joined by current tour player, current coach, Veronika Miroshnichenko. And she has such an amazing story to share, from growing up in the Ukraine, coming to train in the US as a 14-year-old, going on to play college tennis here, and then returning to the pro tour and to coaching later on. So I'm super excited for you to hear her story, for her to share her philosophy around coaching and junior development with you guys. And I think there are a lot of great takeaways from this week's episode. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Veronika. Veronika, welcome to the podcast. It's great to see you again. I think we've only chatted briefly before this, but I've seen you on court more than briefly.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa, for having me. And I really enjoy listening to your podcast as well. Recently, I listened to the episode about US Open juniors, which also made me even more excited to speak to you today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And your friend slash coach slash mentor, I guess, Susan Nardi, has been working to get this interview happening. So I'm super happy that we were able to finally make it work, and I'm very excited to chat with you. So since it's your first time on the podcast, and since maybe my audience isn't so familiar with who you are, even though you are doing really well on the pro tour now on the women's side, can you give us a little bit of your tennis story, how you got started in the sport?
Yeah, of course. So I started playing tennis back in Ukraine in the city Zaporizhia, which is pretty small town, and then it's on the eastern side of Ukraine. And I started at the age of 6, almost 7 years old. And I come from a family of athletes. My mom played professional volleyball, and my dad played ice hockey. So for me, it was kind of a no-brainer that my parents did want me to stay active and play sports, and hopefully in the future will pay off. So I remember at first kind of, not fully understanding what I'm going to do on the tennis court, and just really come in there to socialize with other kids and see if that's something that I want to continue doing in the next few years. And I was also doing some swimming in connection to some tennis, and then I finally stuck with tennis at the age of 8, I would say, or 9. That's when I really ramped up my training and started, paying more attention to my training and understanding all the ins and outs. And then I started competing probably about the age of 10, really taking it serious and playing national tournaments in Ukraine, and just fell in love with the sport, especially when I started traveling around the country, making friends through tennis. That was just so exciting for me. So I was traveling with my grandparents a lot. Both of them dedicated their whole life to making sure that they can be a support system and a backbone in my life, and give me the opportunity to practice as much as I need to. And yeah, so they were traveling with me full time. It's actually really funny because a lot of the parents and kids at the beginning, when I was just starting out, kept thinking that they were my parents, uh, because my mom was working 3 jobs at the time. And as you know, tennis is very expensive, especially back home too, and to be able to afford my tennis budget. So that was nice. And then I remember the coaches told my parents, hey, she's very talented and she has a real shot. If you guys want to make it happen, we have a good support system and we can work things out. So I was fortunate enough, I think, to start in where I started and make sure that I got the best training I could get at that age, and honestly just enjoy the game of tennis even more and more. So
Did you have some Ukrainian tennis idols growing up?
so I looked up to Alina Svitolina a lot, even though she's not that far away in age from me, but still I remember growing up and watching how, she's been progressing through rankings on the WTA tour. And then there were a couple other girls as well. But I kind of also enjoyed looking at other girls, from other countries, some of the players from like Czech Republic, some American players, of course, and just kind of building my own path as well from after looking at them. So.
So you ended up having a very good junior career, and then you wound up coming to the States to play college tennis. What went into that decision, and how did you even know that college tennis existed?
Yeah, so it's actually a very interesting subject, I think, because on that part of the world, I feel like right now players and parents and everyone is more aware how college tennis actually works. But back then, for me, in my head, I thought to myself, okay, I had a ranking of about 700, 800 in the world at that time when I decided to go to LMU. And it was an easy decision because I won my first two professional titles. At that time, it was 10Ks in Egypt. I won singles and I did pretty well in doubles. So my career just started taking off, needed probably a little bit more time to really, fully develop and reach a decent level at my game. And so I think I just, yeah, in my head, I was very frustrated with that and didn't understand how college tennis worked. I thought, okay, maybe it's not the same level of competition, but then quickly, right now looking back, it was just lack of knowledge how everything worked. And of course, my experience was amazing, and I ended up being NCAA All-American, and I played at Loyola Marymount University. At the time I lived in South Florida, so I trained at Kanya's Tennis Academy, which is located in Aventura, like North Miami area. And from there I moved to all the way to the West Coast to Los Angeles, of course. At first, it was a big adjustment for me. I'm not going to lie, because you're coming in from tennis being a very individual sport, and it's all you, training as, all designed for you. And then you're coming into the team environment, and then nothing anymore is about you. It's about the whole team. You're transitioning, you're learning how to cooperate with others and make sure that you're staying disciplined, stick to your routines, especially if you're looking forward to compete again after college, then you have to make sure that you stay committed to your goals and don't kind of spiral down. So.
How was the academic challenge of coming to LMU? Because it's a very strong academic university as well.
Yes. So I was fortunate that I was actually there for 6 years. So I really had a chance I got a chance to get my undergraduate degree in marketing, and then I got a chance to get my master's degree in business management. So that was excellent. It was, I would say, tough to balance both, always making sure that I give 100%, but I always did the best as I could, and I maintained a pretty high GPA throughout my whole collegiate career. So our coach always emphasized that, you guys are students before you're athletes, and make sure that those two go hand in hand. And you are here, you have a full-time job, you have to show up for classes and for practice. So emphasizing that importance and making sure that athletes understand that this is not just like a summer camp where you're able to get a free education and participate on the team. You still have to give your 100%. So yeah.
And do you feel like, looking back and looking at where you are now, ranking wise, tennis skills wise, that was a good decision to come here and focus on your education for 6 years and then move back out onto the professional tour?
Yeah, I think it was actually excellent, and we see more and more examples of this in today's tennis world, and I was one of those players as well that chose this path and went to college at the time because, like we said, tennis is very expensive sport, and if you don't have sponsors, you don't have an agent, I feel like it's hard to move past that as smooth as you think you would. And so I think I wouldn't change it looking back right now. and it's not for everyone. I think, of course, if you see that your child is progressing through juniors very fast and there are certain opportunities that come their way, and financially it makes more sense to turn pro, sure, then I think it's just really individual approach. That's what I find in today's tennis world in general. But just having that security and sense of security that you do have a degree and you have something to fall back on in case, because it's such an unpredictable sport and you can get injured, God forbid, that's not what you wish upon anyone, but we just don't know. And I've had actually a fair share of injuries in my career as well. One of them being life-changing last year in 2024 season when I was climbing up the rankings. I was ranked 280 in singles in the world and 200 doubles, and my career was just, really taking off pretty fast. So I was probably about 4 tournaments away from making it to the qualis of French Open last year, and then I hurt my wrist. So that I kind of didn't anticipate at that time, but it actually led me to, a series of other good decisions, and then also kind of getting more interested in the field of coaching and make sure that I share my experience with younger players and with parents. I just really enjoy doing that.
And I want to jump into that, your coaching experience and what you're doing now. But I want to back up for 1 second because I didn't realize you had come to an academy in the States before college. What age did you move to Florida?
Yeah, so I moved to Florida when I was about 14 years old, 15, I would say. Yeah.
Wow.
So, that was a big transition for me, I remember, because I've always lived fairly close to home, so I could just take a flight, hop on a plane, and be home whenever I felt like I needed a little bit of a recharge. And then, of course, when you're moving across the ocean, that's not really an opportunity. So I think at first it was really hard for me to come to terms with that idea, being so far away from home. And yeah, but actually I was surrounded by very amazing people at the academy, a really good coaching system. It was different because when you train one-on-one with a coach, all attention once again is fully on you. And I was used to traveling with my coach from Ukraine for about 5 years, I would say. And we actually made it all the way through juniors and then transitioning to pros. Yeah, and so for me, academy setting was also something new, but I was very fortunate that these people really made it easy for me, that transition. So.
Whose decision was it to make the move to the States? Because you said your grandparents would travel with you to the tournaments in the juniors, but 14 is still pretty young.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was a mutual decision from my parents and myself. We were always communicating about how we felt about my career and where it needs to be. And I think US just has excellent opportunities in terms of, having like courts, having many coaches, many players here. And it's just changing up the scenery in a way, because in your career, if one thing doesn't click or it doesn't really work, you want to make sure that you at least give yourself a chance to try something else. And at that time, one of my friends trained at the academy at Kanyes, and she was actually number one junior in the world, and she was already top 200 on tour. So I knew that this was a great place for me to try out, and I went, and yeah, it was mutual decision. I would say no one was really forcing me. Of course, they listened to my thought process, and then we kind of just talked it out a little bit. So.
And looking back on that now, do you feel like that was the right decision at the time?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think that we could have tried to find another coach that would travel with me. Um, I don't think at that point we had much time to look into it, because I just split up with my coach in Ukraine and he moved to the United States, actually to the same city where I ended up training. So we just randomly met up in Miami then, and it just was nice to catch up. But yeah, so it was it was interesting how everything worked out, and from there, I think that it was just slow, slow progress and just building little by little. So, yeah.
It's just always, when I talk to people like you who left home early, and there's so many different experiences that go into that, right? And I think it's important for our audience to
Hmm.
hear these stories,
Yeah,
because I get asked all the time, I'm thinking of
sure.
sending my kid to an academy in Spain or an academy in France, or somebody in
Yeah,
California wants to send them to Florida, or Florida wants to send them out
yeah,
here. And
yeah.
and so I think it's really important for parents to understand the factors that they need to be considering when making these
Mhm.
decisions, and for the players too, to be very aware of what it means to leave your parents and live somewhere else that's not your home.
Yeah, sure, I agree because there are a lot of details that go into this, and I think at the beginning it was more like a trial period for me in a way where I was going to just try the academy out and see if the coaches are good, if whether, I'm a good fit as well in that place. And yeah, I mean, from the start, I think one of the most difficult things was just managing my whole life by myself at the academy, so you had
At
to
age 14.
at the age of 14, almost
Yeah.
15. So, but still very young, and you're still growing up as an adult, and not only you're growing on the court, but off the court. So I think when you have your parents by your side, it's a little bit easier. And I've seen some of the kids at the academy, they had their parents travel either from South America, for example, or from other states, or from somewhere else to just stay with them for a few weeks, which actually my parents did the same thing, but they could only stay for so long because of their visa. So for someone who's at least on the same continent, it's definitely easier. So I think that's really important to be able to support your child when you can, and be present there. And also look into, obviously, financially, is this something that, you think that you can support, because being at the academy is also costly depending on the place and things like that. But to me, what really stood out was personalized approach, and how it wasn't just a bunch of kids in one group and we were doing whatever, which I've also been at other academies in the past, and that was the case, kind of, where I felt like I was kind of left behind in a way, but that was at an older age, so I wasn't worried about, just all that as much as I did before. And I think, yeah, just having a good support system of coaches that know what they're doing, that they know how to take the player from point A to point B and help them progress from juniors and transition to pros, which was my case. I came there when I played US Open juniors in 2014, I believe. Yeah. And so from there on, just, then I started playing more ITF tournaments, and it was very important stage for me as a player. So
Now I'm going to have to look back and see if I was at your match at the US Open Juniors back then,
there you go.
because I was definitely at the tournament that year. So I'll
Yeah,
have to look back and see. That'd be so funny. It's
yeah,
always fun to go back and look at the draws and look at my notes of who I
yeah,
watched. And yeah.
yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah.
So you have now, since this wrist injury happened last year, and I'm so sorry to hear about that. That's just brutal.
Mhm.
Um, it opened an opportunity for you to pursue your interest in coaching and working with younger kids. So, can you talk a little bit about what draws you to want to coach, and what you feel like you have to offer these kids that are coming up in the sport?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. The most important thing for me is to be able to give them the resource that maybe at times I did not have, and bring that player's perspective, from someone who competed on tour and still to this day actually competes, and also learn so much from Susan. Actually, she's my mentor in many ways in the world of coaching, and I learned so much from her, how to approach certain things and add my own spin as well. Because, obviously, period of time when some of the coaches that are a little bit older, more experienced, let's say, the game evolved so much today in certain ways that it's good to also bring something what you currently have and provide that opportunity for players. So I'm just very excited. There's nothing actually that compares to the feeling when you show a kid something, you're trying to explain the concept, you're working on the shot, and then it just clicks in their head, and then they start doing it, and you see how, every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes during practice, you're building the blocks like a house, and it's just very satisfying feeling. I think I'm very attentive when I coach. I have that type of approach, and I try to be very hands-on. And sometimes, yeah, when I was coached, that wasn't always the case, although, I was fortunate enough to work with some great coaches in my career that changed that, and shaped me into who I am today. But just speaking from experience, I think that hands-on approach and also providing some freedom to them, and let them play tennis and make mistakes, and it's okay, no one's there to really punish you or do anything, because growing up in Ukraine, it's a slightly different approach. Sometimes coaches are a little more vocal and like just outspoken in ways, that they can sometimes say things without filter, and it's not always good. This is one of the things that I really enjoyed coming here to the United States, that nothing had to be so stressful and just like forced on you. It was more a process of collaboration with the coach. And you have to understand that you're in one team with your coach, and you just have to create together. So that's just what I like. I think it's one of the creative outputs, and also grow as a coach when you try to master something, when I know that my game in tennis can still improve. It's always something. Even some of the best tennis players in the world, like Sinner, Sabalenka, and some others, they still have things that they try to improve. But I think in the world of coaching, I really can master this as years go by, and make a difference in women's sports as well. So
That's awesome. We hear a lot from coaches, mainly US coaches, saying that American kids are just so soft, and that's why we haven't had a men's Grand Slam champion in so long. And
Mhm.
that we need to, train these kids to be tougher and more resilient and blah blah blah
Mhm.
blah blah, which yes. And it's interesting to hear you say one of the things that you liked so much about coming here was the softer approach of the coaches here. So, how do you kind of meld those things together so that these kids that you're working with feel that sense of caring from you, but also are still building that grit, that resistance, that ability to bounce back?
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of both in me, because of the way how I was brought up in tennis. There's still that tough love situation where you still want to make sure that they're there and they're getting the most out of it, that their parents, I realize that they invest in this sport, and you want to make sure that you also work hard and utilize your time and your resources wisely, because not everyone has those opportunities and resources. Sometimes some of the kids can afford, 3 privates per week, and some kids can only come for an hour per week, And so for those kids, I always make sure that I communicate and say that, hey guys, if you have opportunity to be here more often, please make sure that, you're staying focused, that you're paying attention. I'm here to help you, and I want you to get better. So yeah, just like cherishing those opportunities. But on the other hand, with that discipline and with that, kind of sense of, okay, I have to be strict at times, I have to also make sure that I choose how I communicate, and also emphasize positive coaching more, and make sure that I use positive body language. And, I really encourage kids to do well and just stay positive throughout the whole practice. And that will hopefully translate in matches then. And um, it's all basically training it day in and day out, and then it just, sticks with you for the rest of your career, really, especially from the
In
young age. So,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. In your opinion, in your coaching experience so far, Veronika, are there questions that you wish parents would ask when they first come to you about working with their child?
yeah, I think sometimes there are two extremes where I can see parents being overly involved, so the child feels like they have so much pressure to perform during practice. And I can see that they always look for external validation from a parent, and they don't have that, just full sense of freedom on the court, if that makes sense. And then on the other hand, there are some parents that are not involved. So I think the middle ground is it's all about balance. So I think some of the questions would be obviously how you can help my child and actually understand what plan you would have for us, because it's important. I think when you come to a new coach, um, you should ask those questions because you're investing your time, your money. And I find it that some parents, not everyone, of course, but some parents treat tennis more as an activity and not training, but they want training like results at the end. So sometimes I have to remind parents that if your child comes here for a week, for 1 day a week, let's say for an hour or hour and a half, it's going to take a little bit longer for them to progress than if they came more consistently, let's say, or for more time. But then again,
Right.
it kind of goes back to the point not everyone can afford that, because tennis is expensive. So
But let me interrupt you 1 second because I think this is an important point that a lot of coaches kind of skip this step when they're talking to the parents. There are parents that are going to come to you as a coach who don't want their kid on the competitive pathway. They just want them to learn the skills of playing tennis, to have this recreational thing in their life that will serve them through their entire life. And then there are the parents that come in that want their kid, they say, or the kid says, I want to be a professional tennis player, but the coach hasn't fully explained to them what that means and what it takes to achieve that, right? And so I think it is super important for the coach and the parents to have that conversation up front. Like, what's the goal here? And let me, as the coach, tell you if your goal is professional or high level college tennis, these are the steps that you're going to have to commit to in order to help make that happen.
yes, sure. Yeah, I agree absolutely. And I think I've recently had that conversation last week with one of the parents because they've been, um, looking to get into a varsity team, and so I just explained a little bit more of what it takes to get to the next level and how you can make it happen. And that, going back to the point of treating it as an activity versus training, in case your plan is to progress further, for example, then you have to spend XYZ amount of hours per week outside of of the private time. For example, go out on your own and try to hit against the wall, or just go out and do some shadow swings, just kind of practice those little things by yourself if you can. And that's going to dramatically help you, I think. And then on the other hand, if you don't want to go down that path and you just want to learn tennis and enjoy the game, and it being more of like a social sport for the child in the future, and just to get into circles and such, I think that yeah, you should just treat it a little bit differently. You have to be flexible and adapt as you go, because not every approach is the same. When it becomes more of like a streamline environment where you train everyone exactly the same, no matter what their goals are, I think that would be the problem, from
Yeah,
coach's perspective. So.
for sure. Okay, so I interrupted your flow, but what are some of the other questions that you wish parents would ask when they're first starting out?
Yeah, I think just asking about, training process, like exactly what I just said, like diving a little more into what it actually takes to be a player, like about some people never ask about conditioning and extra hours spent, in the gym, and how can I, help my child develop fully. Let's say it's a younger child, they're 5 years old, they're very young, they're just, basically learning how to catch a tennis ball and just learning their hand-eye coordination and getting better. So I think just, what exercises would you recommend? What should we do off the court? How can we implement those things in training? And also asking obviously about the coach as well, about their approach, because I actually rarely hear that question being asked. So how do you approach working with kids? What is your style of coaching? Some people do ask that question, but not very, very common, honestly. So
there's there's a lot of chatter online about, you know, being with a coach who has a track record of developing top players. In your mind, given that you're new at this,
yeah.
do you feel like as a new coach, even though you haven't yet had the opportunity to develop a player all the way from age 5 to
Yeah.
age 20, why should somebody bring their child to you? You don't have the track record, but you're a player. Like, you've lived the life, right? So
Yeah.
how do you talk to that family that says, well, show me what you've done?
Yeah, so I picked up coaching about actually 6 or 7 years ago, more seriously, I would say, because I coached throughout my collegiate career as well, and that's something that was always at the back of my head, actually. And I think that I saw results of my coaching on adults at first, and then I also actually worked at the First Break Academy for a little bit. That's how I met Susan, and that's how we connected. She was my supervisor at the kids' summer camp, and I worked there for about 2 summers. It was awesome. I was around kids, and that's where I was shadowing Susan a lot and picking up certain skills that I did not have at that time as a coach, and just progressed. So I think then once I started seeing first results from that, and kind of adding my own a little, like my own pieces, little by little, sharing my experience as a player and how today's game in tennis has changed. So like that all together, I think is also very valuable for the player, to
For
share that,
sure.
because right now on tour we actually see quite a few female coaches as well. Obviously, some of them were much higher in rankings than I have, but then there are examples of the girls that played on the WTA, ITF tour that travel with players, and they were able to help them tremendously progress in rankings. I think it's just a whole new take because it's such a male-driven, industry.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I think that
Yeah.
to be able to embrace it and really, think of it as like if let's say another male player can do it, why can I not do it? I have the same skills, I'm pretty confident within myself and know what I have to bring to the table, pretty strong understanding of mechanics and also understanding the importance of psychological, tactical aspects. So just very well-rounded, I would say. I don't want to brag about myself in that way, but I think that that all together in connection can be really valuable to a player. And I've had experience where I worked with some coaches that maybe were not top 10 in the past, or did not coach for 30 plus years on tour, but they were able to get somewhere with the player to the level that, where they thought they could be and help them reach their goals. That was the case with my Ukrainian coach, actually. I was the first player from that city that made it that far, I would say, on a professional tour. And he just, he was riding that, we were on the same boat for those 5 years, 6 years.
Yeah.
And I think as much as I was growing as a player, he was growing as a coach, and it's always evolving process. So I find it that, I do realize I have a lot of things to learn still in the field, and hopefully get to work with the player that, I'm going to take to the next level, and see that progress, but, also go through that journey step by step. So hope, and it all starts with trust. Honestly, I think the trust component where it has to work on both ends. You have to be able to trust that whole process that your coach is also going through with you. And yeah, so that's just my take on it. I think that it's always work in progress, but knowing that you have already very strong foundation and understanding of everything. And I think I always want to learn. That's one of the best qualities about me, that I don't want to just stop and be stationary. I like to, as a professional athlete, track my progress, so I think stagnation is never an option. So
Yeah. Well, and you just mentioned trust, and I think that's something that doesn't get discussed enough, needs to happen more. And the trust isn't just the player trusting the coach, the parent trusting the coach. The trust goes all the ways around the triangle, right? It's player to parent, player to coach, parent
yeah.
to player, parent to coach. You get the picture. So developing that type of trusting relationship all around the triangle is not something that happens overnight.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that all parties have to work toward and work on. And if there's a stumbling block in there, it needs to be addressed quickly and resolved quickly in order for the trust to keep moving in the right direction.
Sure. Yeah, totally agreed. I think that open communication is the key, because this is the sport that, anything can happen in the span of 1 week, and you can just, win a couple matches here and there, and then your career just takes you off to a whole different direction, right? So everything has to kind of happen on its own timing. There's no rush. I'm a strong believer that everyone has their own timing, but at the same time, that open communication just kind of accelerates all other things in a way. And I find it from my experience as a player and as a coach that families that have that open, conversation about things with the coach and with the player, to just facilitate, sometimes help younger players facilitate that conversation with the coach. Those are the families that usually do, do pretty well in the world
Yeah.
of tennis. It's just
Yeah.
kind of creating that team-like environment from a very young age, because we see those finished products on the ATP WTA tour, where you have a physio, you have a psychologist traveling with you, you have a tennis coach, and just members of your team. And if you can kind of create a mini version of that from a very young age and explain that it's us together and we got this. It's not just you on your own in this, and whatever your goal might be, we're there to support you and really provide you resources without hopefully not looking for anything in return, so without them feeling the pressure of performance and fighting for those points like it's their last match of their life. It's actually very interesting because I have two younger sisters, and right now they're going through a phase of growing up, and I'm also mentoring them and helping my mom go through this whole process all over again because she didn't get that chance when I was younger because she was working, but now, very grateful that she's able to help my sisters to create that environment. And one of my sisters, she's 12 years old, the other one is 14. So they're playing Tennis Europe junior tournaments. And for me to now have a look as well, how I could have done things differently in my calendar, looking back and looking at the tournaments very smartly, realizing that there have to be some training blocks. But one of the interesting things that I mentioned to her in our recent conversation was that I think you guys train pretty good amount at this point, but at some point in time, tournaments slightly have to start taking over that training process, so you know that you're training with the goal of competing and performing well because um, right now we're finding that my sister gets very nervous starting her matches, and I told them I think that's because she plays one tournament a month, and then she has to face that nervous state again and again because while it's fresh and you're in the tournament cycle, it's just easier for you to transition. And I can recognize that now looking back, what was happening sometimes with me as well.
That's
So
so interesting.
so I think
Yeah,
I can
because
also kind of like sort of could kind of balance and bring that into my family as best as I can because um, as much as I think the coach has always best intentions for you. Hopefully, if you found a good coach for yourself and it's a great chemistry and good fit and there's a trust and all the other components. But I think there is nothing more valuable than having a tennis member in your family, that they have your best interest at heart. They've gone through the whole journey from start to finish. And now on to the next stage, like in my example, going into coaching. And it's just so easy for me to spot certain things. And my mom also fully trusts me with whatever I have to say. So I think it's very interesting how I can also work on scheduling and time management with them and just, be like already an agent basically from afar as much as I can. So.
no, I think that's awesome. And, also for them to have you as a sounding board, and it's not just your mom having to shoulder the responsibility, but they've got big sister here who's lived the life and living the life to kind of empathize when things are maybe a bit of a struggle versus, the time when things are going smoothly and they don't need that as much. But I think that's amazing. And you mentioned a minute ago about the mental side of tennis, and I wanted to, before, because gosh, the time is just flying here, before we wind up, I wanted to touch on the fact that the mental side of tennis has become a big focus. We're seeing the tour players talk about it quite a bit. They're taking breaks from the tour for their own mental health, and they're being very open about the fact that they're seeking support for their mental state, their psychological well-being. Was that a part of your upbringing in Ukraine? That addressing the mental side of being a competitive athlete, and how do you incorporate that in the coaching that you're doing now with these young kids?
Yeah, it's actually a very, very interesting question to ask me in particular because I think going back to the point that I was kind of growing up with my coach at the same time, who did not have that previous experience with the player that was moving at my pace, a male coach, not to say that all male coaches, kind of have the same approach. Everyone operates at their own pace, but.
Sure.
At that time, I don't think that was communicated enough to me. And during some moments, I was actually very lucky that I also had a great relationship with my coach's wife at that time, who we just loved taking to tournaments the whole time. I remember whenever she could afford to travel with us, of course, because she still had her own work to do. But to have a female figure there, that's not my family, but at least, someone who's almost like I don't want to call it mediator because that kind of has a negative connotation, but maybe just, just someone who's
She
there
softened things.
kind of diffuse certain situations
Yeah.
at the time because everyone goes through their teenage phase and tries to develop as a player, as a person. So you're still young, and there are lots of things to learn. And same for a coach, on the other hand. But it was hard for me at that age as a player to put myself in his shoes. So I think if looking back now, it would be kind of difficult for me to also work with my younger version of the self, which we really laugh these days about it. Oh, just talking like, remember that trip and this trip and how, you know, you weren't cooperating enough with us. So I think just like making sure that you have that figure that you do trust and you can open up with and say, hey, I think this is how I feel at that moment, and maybe that wasn't your intention to uh kind of bring this point across in such a manner, but this is how I perceived it. And then so sometimes lack of that communication back and forth can create a certain tension, I think. That was just like my experience, and now looking back, that I'm in the shoes of being a coach, I think it's really important to bring up that mental side of things and also emphasize certain things. I see a lot of players, obviously, talking about mental side as well. And, we've seen Amanda Anisimova take a little break, and there was a fair share of challenges in her life and in her career, that made her into who she is today, actually. And she's been doing fantastic. I think one of my favorite players to watch. And I actually trained in the same city as she has because she's also, she was in North Miami for a while. And yeah, got a chance to meet her family as well before. But yeah, so just, I think having that open conversation, because when you work with females, there are just so many components that go into this, and you have to take so many things into consideration because honestly, you're human before you're an athlete. And, some days you'll struggle just like anyone else who goes to work, and because it is a full-time job. And you can't allow yourself to have off days because you have to perform, you have responsibilities. There are people that help you get to that level as well, so you feel responsible for them. So I think you carry just that whole weight with yourself. Sometimes it's hard just to do it on your own. So it's good to always have, a shoulder or a couple people next to you who can lift you up. And it's, tennis has a lot to do with it, but I think it just goes even more beyond, and teams that I've seen that are able to balance both sides and not just keeping it strictly on the tennis court. I think those are the ones that have more success these days.
I agree. Yeah. And I think, you're working with some younger kids as well that, they have to learn the language of communicating emotion, right? You're not born knowing how to talk about your feelings.
No.
And some families are very open and verbal and vocal, and it's part of their daily conversation, and other families aren't. And so, one of the pieces of coaching young kids is helping them learn that language, learning the language of tennis, learning the language of self-expression, learning to put language to what's going on in their brain and their gut and their heart. I mean, it's a big responsibility, and it makes me really happy that you're out there doing this, because even though we don't know each other very well, I've only heard amazing things about you from Susan. And I'm really excited at the thought of you being out there helping to shape this next generation of players coming up. So well
Uh,
done.
you. Yeah, I'm definitely very excited, and I think I'm very flexible with my approach as well. I try to be very open-minded because, like you said, you get to meet new people every time, and uh, one approach that applies to some kid may not apply to the other, and you have to, it's all in my world about the player and the kid, how they respond. So it's always tailored to what they need and how they operate. I learn about them as a person before I treat them as an athlete, because this is a new sport if they come very young to me, which I got a chance to work with little kids, and I also work with some players that are competing, already USTA level. They're looking to get into colleges and high schools and whatnot. So it's just two different ends, but I think just being flexible, positive, learn more, and just yeah, be willing to progress and learn new things as the same way like your students do. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Veronika, if families are interested in having their children work with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
yeah, sure. So the best way to get in touch with me, I think, would be through my phone number, obviously,
Okay.
but also I have social media. If any family has an Instagram, they can reach out to me, and I'm going to drop some information for you that you can share with the audience.
Yep.
Would be awesome. And also on Facebook, I'm on Facebook. You guys can take a look at my page as well. So yeah, I would be
And I
excited
think
to
you're
meet some
part of
of
our
you.
Facebook group now too, right? I'm pretty sure
Yes,
you're,
yes,
yeah.
yes. So
So
I joined couple months ago, I believe. So
yeah, yeah. So we will have all of Veronika's contact info, all of her social media tags in the show notes on parentingaces.com or wherever you're consuming this podcast. You'll be able to see that. So if you want to reach out to her, she is in the LA area. And like I said, I've seen her at events around here, so I know she's around. And if you want to reach out to her, please do that. And she is continuing to work with Susan Nardi as well. And for those of you who don't know Susan, go back through our podcast archives. I've got episodes with her in there as well, and you can get a little bit better feel for her approach. But between the two of them, I promise you, your child will be in great hands. So definitely, if you're looking for a coaching situation, you're in the Southern California area, it is worth reaching out to Veronika.
thank you so much, Lisa. That was
Yeah, thank
wonderful
you.
to be able to chat with you and share my experience. And I'm very open to talking to parents, even if they just want to get my opinion and give me a call or a text. You know where to find me. So
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. Thanks so much for the great conversation. And
thank you so much.
I look forward to getting to watch you play. And I look forward to getting to watch you as a coach in action with your students playing. So that'll be super fun.
Thank you
To
so
my
much.
audience, to my audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time on Parenting Aces.